Hello, and welcome to Joe and Cat Chats. Today we're talking about current events, and we're recording live on April 13th, 2021 on Facebook and YouTube at /JoeNiceDJ. You can always find us on our socials at Joe and Cat Chats or on our personal pages at JoeNiceDJ and at CatWells22. We're also happy to be a part of Tastemakers Radio on Dash Radio, so listen to us there every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific and 2 p.m. Eastern. As usual, I am excited to get into this topic, and it's going to be an interesting episode, and I think there's some emotions that are high, so hopefully we'll have some folks tuning in. But first, how are you, Joe?
You know what? I don't know anymore. And again, I want to make sure that everybody understands what the hell is going on here, okay? The mask says, stop killing black people, defund the police. Okay, I have a button with none other than George Floyd. We still want justice for George Floyd. Okay, I'm going to show everybody my shirt because this is what is important today. It says, how many more public executions must we witness? When shall we rise? Okay, out to Ezra and Tracy on that shirt. I appreciate them very much, from Zam Zam Recordings in Portland, Oregon, one of the best record labels in the history of record labels. I want to make sure everybody understands this is going to be a highly charged and emotional episode. There is a lot to talk about. There is nobody, and I mean nobody, that should be happy about anything that has happened over the past 72, 96, however long. 144 hours, whatever you want to say. Nobody should be happy about anything because injustices continue to happen, not only in the United States, but around the world. Again, Kat, we had big plans, grandiose plans of talking about Black athletes and activism and cultural importance and relevance. That is going to take a backseat today to everything that has happened over the past several days. We need to talk about these issues. We have a voice, we have a platform, we have a responsibility and duty to our people who watch us on a week-to-week basis, who tweet at us, who support us, who watch our programs, who download our episodes. And they, now more than ever, our voice is needed in this space, in this time, and in this place.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about yourself?
Yeah,
how are you?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I can say something similar. I'm exhausted at the news that continues to just bombard us with the murder of our brothers and sisters through state-sanctioned police forces. It's exhausting. It's heartbreaking. It's, anger-inducing. And it's time for people who look like me with white skin to take some responsibility, because our BIPOC folks in this country and in your country and all around the world are mourning. They're exhausted too. And I mean, there's a lot to be said. I'm at a loss for words in some sense, because it's just the same shit over and over again, and we cannot allow this to continue.
No one learned anything from last summer. Nobody learned anything from last summer. Nobody learned anything from last summer. Nobody learned anything. Where are all the people over this past weekend that found my email address and found me on Facebook after 15 or 20 or 30 years? They were like, hey, you know what, man, Joe, I saw George Floyd get murdered, and you know what? It really shook me to my core.
Yeah.
It really affected me in such a way, and I didn't know it would impact me like this. And I'm sorry. I'm going to do better. I'm going to do better. I'm going to do better. Where the hell are you now? Where the fuck are these people? Where are you? Where are you? Nowhere to be seen. Where are all the people that put black squares on their Instagram?
Yeah.
Where are they now? They're on vacation, or they're at the hot tub, where they're going hiking in the woods. And again, look, I'm all for people doing what they're supposed to be doing on their free time. That's fine. That's all well and good. You have your life to live. You live it. And I'm not going to tell anyone how to live their life unless I am willing to be told how to live mine. All right. And I'm going to be crystal clear with when I say that. That being said, I am beyond tired of the woke theatrics.
Yeah.
I'm tired of internet activism. Okay. Yeah. I'm tired of Earth. I'm tired of this fucking planet, because regardless of whatever country you go to, there is some bullshit happening to people who are darker skinned, and it is ridiculous. And there's loads of evidence that we have. There's loads of issues we need to talk about. And we have about 55 minutes to cover a lot of issues. Again, if you are watching, and we have about 18, 19 people watching right now, if you are watching and you want to participate, and if you want to have a chat with us and jump on the live stream, by all means, please jump in.
And thank you to everyone who's tuning in. It means a lot to us, because, you know, as we say at the end of every episode, we do this because we care about you, and we care about the people who are being murdered, and we care about our community members, our friends, our families, our neighbors, all of the people around you, whether we agree with them or not. We care. And that's why we continue to do this. And I think that that's something, you know, we talk about often, but it's not necessarily articulated in that way. I think it's important right now to really outline why we're doing this, because it's been almost a year of us doing this podcast, and it began in response to the murder of George Floyd by Derek Chauvin, who is absolutely guilty. We all know that, and for some reason the trial still goes on. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why we've continued, but I think at the core of it is because we care, and we know that people need to understand these issues better in order to want to fight them. And by issues, I mean, like, at the core of it, systemic white supremacy.
Agreed. And a couple of comments here before I know you have a lot more to say. Out to Alicia, childhood friend, she said, you asked, where are these people? But what people are you talking about? BIPOC, or there's a white circle that is meant to represent white people? Because white circle that is in white people supremacy is not the issue of BIPOC to fix. Alicia, I wholeheartedly agree. Wholeheartedly agree. Kat, you and I have talked about this. We've said that it is not Black people's problem to fix white people's racism.
No.
We've talked about that. We've been crystal clear about making those points. If you want to elaborate on what Alicia has to say, by all means, please do so.
Yeah. I had some, you know, racing thoughts last night as I was reviewing the news and just, you know, going through things. And I wrote down a bunch of stuff.
Fire away.
And I was going to condense it into like a smaller paragraph so that I could just summarize kind of my thoughts. But you actually just encouraged me to be raw and be vulnerable and just say the whole thing. And so I will say, starting out, I don't think I finished my thoughts well, but hopefully my point will come across anyway. So,
by the way, Kat, this is Joe and Kat chats. It's not just Joe and Kat some of the time, or Kat and Joe every once in a while. This is Joe and Kat chats. This is a team effort. This is a collaborative enterprise. So if you have something to say and you need to take a bunch of time to say it, we've got time. Go for it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. I appreciate that. And of course, yeah, it's a collaboration in every sense of the word. And, you know, I've relied on you sometimes, and you've relied on me sometimes for certain aspects of this. And that's why it's a partnership, and that's why we keep going, for sure.
There's no I in team.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. So I guess now is a good time. I'll just I'll read what I wrote last night, and hopefully it will resonate, and hopefully it will be, the point of it is sort of a call to action. So I want to start with a moment of silence for those who have been brutalized and murdered by police, and the families who are in mourning from these treacherous events. Our hearts go out to you. So it's been a difficult year. This winter was really challenging for me and for so many others too. We are tired, we're exhausted, we are grieving, but also this is the beginning. It's a new year, the seasons are changing, and we are no longer dormant, save for the realities of the continuing pandemic and the restrictions that we all need to be following to keep ourselves and others safe. But right now, I want to make a call to everyone who listens and anyone who may hear this by chance. This call is for anyone willing to listen. But I want to speak specifically and directly to my fellow white folks in this moment. I want to invite your attention back to this work, the work of showing up and the work of striving or becoming anti-racist. I know it has been difficult to stay focused, and I know you have had other things going on in your life, but I need you to listen really intently, because if you do not, more blood will be on your hands as they are on my hands. You do not get to pass the buck anymore. You do not get to be too busy to pay attention to all of the killings of Black and brown bodies in the streets, in their homes, in their places of work, while you live your life knowing that you are protected from harm and they are not. You do not get to make excuses for your actions of complacency and inaction anymore. You should be the ones out in the streets demanding justice. We need to be the ones out on the streets demanding justice, demanding the abolition of these white supremacist institutions like police. You should be the one making phone calls and emailing every week to demand our elected officials to take steps to abolish the police. You're responsible for every death that happens for as long as these fucking police departments exist, because even if you have nothing to do with police, like myself and probably most of you who listen, you need to understand that you and I are the reason they still exist. We are why police exist, because of our fears, our guilt, and our worldviews taught to us from such a young age. It seems like dismantling this perspective feels like a personal attack when it's not at all. This feeling that you need to protect what you have from the world around you is because you were taught your whole life that what you work for is yours and that the cops were there to protect it. But that's a lie. You work to make other people rich, and they sold you this fallacy so that you would help to maintain a system that benefits you just enough so that you could have a decent life for you and your family. We have been taught that other people should be feared because they are different. We are taught that we need to take care of ourselves because no one else is going to do it for us, with us, I should say. But making you believe that everyone else is scary just serves to uphold the systems that we have been taught to protect. And those systems are based on white supremacy. That fear you have, that someone else might take what you have, what you worked so hard for, that divides us so fundamentally that the mere concept of community care is confusing and it seems unattainable, but it's not. We need to be the ones who stand up and start taking actions that will not only dismantle the systems we continue to uphold, but will simultaneously build relationships with our neighbors, our communities, and even our enemies. It's been a year since we heard about the murder of George Floyd, nearly. And in that year, you and I have done lots of things. But the one thing we need to be held accountable for is the waning interest or drive or rage that white people demonstrated a year ago. You know who you are. You know, I know you're scared, saddened, and feeling helpless as these police killings continue. But the time for inaction is over. It's been over. You and I, as white people, need to be the ones who make changes without allowing our fears to take hold. Because you know what's really scary? Driving in a car while Black. Having an air freshener on your rear view mirror. Daunte Wright. Philando Castile. Rayshard Brooks. Freddie Gray. You know what's really scary is walking down the street while Black. Trayvon Martin. Tamir Rice. Alton Sterling. Michael Brown. You know what's really scary is going to work while Asian. In Atlanta, Soon Chung Park. Han Jung Grant. Sucha Kim, Young Yu, Delania Ashley Young, Paul Andre Michaels, Chao Ji Tan, Dao Yu Feng. You know what's really scary is being at home while Black. Ariana Jefferson, Aura Rosser, and sleeping in your bed at night. Breonna Taylor. You know what's really scary is having a mental health crisis while Brown. Ijaz Chaudhry, Regis Korchinski Paquette. I say their names because they and many others deserved to live, and because we are responsible for the systems that continue to murder BIPOC people in the streets, in their homes, in their workplaces. We are responsible. So I urge you to rise up and use your sadness, your fear, your guilt, and push through it. Push through it because we cannot live like this anymore. We have talked on this podcast before about white fragility. We've talked about white supremacy. We've talked about all sorts of institutions and systemic, institutionalized racism, sexism. I mean, sometimes I just am at a loss for words because I feel like though it's so important that we're doing this work, Joe, I also feel like sometimes our words are empty in the sense that no one really gets to hear them because things have not changed.
First of all, thank you for everything you just said over the past 10, 11, 12 minutes. There are days, and I had a conversation with somebody earlier today on Instagram. There are days when I feel excellent given the circumstances. I'm ready to get my burpees in, get my kettlebell swings in, get my 10,000 steps going.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other days where I don't feel like getting out of bed or leaving my apartment. There are days when I get up early in the morning and go for a walk and I see the occasional state trooper walk by or the drive by or the occasional Chapel Hill, Carrboro, Raleigh, Durham Police Department drive by. There are times when I am legitimately worried for about a split second or two until I see them drive past me. And that is a real fear. That is a real phenomenon. And that is something that white folks don't have to deal with. That is something that white people will never understand what it is like to have a cop car pull up behind you and you're not necessarily sure if you're going to live past that police encounter. That is something white folks will never understand. White folks will never understand walking past a white person and the old white lady clutches her purse a little bit tighter. Or you cross the street and a white person locks their doors to their car. So, as we said 2 weeks ago when we did our race, whiteness, and white fragility episode, people don't get to pick and choose who they want to support or who they feel needs support, because this, quite honestly, is an all or nothing situation. You're in it or you're not. You either call somebody in or call somebody out. Just like I said a couple of weeks ago, rest in peace, Ansel Anderson. So we're going to continue to do this because in our language episode, we talked about what a sound is. It's reverberations through space that somebody else receives. And we know people are listening. We know people are watching. And it doesn't have to be 1 billion people that make a change. It doesn't have to be 2 billion people that make a change, although that would be nice. If one person looks at within themselves and says, you know what, damn, okay, I got to do better. That's good enough. Because if one person decides to make a change, that change that one person makes could save somebody else's life.
Yeah.
And regardless of whatever someone's political ideology is, their gender affiliation, their race, their nationality, their religious beliefs, their education level, whatever. And I'm going to be crystal clear when I say this. Every single life on earth is precious.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Everybody has a right to live. Everybody deserves to live. Everybody. I don't want to see anyone get killed at the hands of police under any circumstances. I for damn sure don't like seeing it when it happens disproportionately to Black and brown people. And there's plenty of evidence stating that. There's plenty of evidence showing this. So what we're going to spend the next 38 minutes talking about is many of the issues that we've seen over the past week or two. But quite honestly, this really could just be a year in review situation because of everything that we've talked about over the past 44 episodes. More comments and then we'll get moving. Alicia saying, going to throw this out there too. While white, I use white because of finding white isn't bullying. People fight white supremacy outside. BIPOC have to battle it within. So many of us internalize it. It poisons all of us in different ways. Alicia, I thoroughly agree with you. The white supremacy, I would argue that white supremacy is worse now than it was in the 50s and 60s. And this might sound counterintuitive, but I'm going to opine for about another 90 seconds. The reason why I feel it's a bit more insidious and a bit more difficult to deal with now than before, at least in the 50s and 60s, you could see what the enemy was. You could see that there were hordes of police actively beating up Black people. You could see it. The racism was obvious. Black people in this water fountain, white people in this water fountain. Black people go to these schools, white people go to these schools. And if you remember the education episode, we talked about Brown versus the Board of Education. And there was a court case that happened in Washington, D.C. that preceded Brown versus the Board of Education. It happened in Washington, D.C. It was called Bowling versus Sharp, which essentially desegregated schools in Washington, D.C. Then after that, Brown versus the Board of Education. How many times have I held up a copy of the United States Constitution and said these exact words? Black people didn't get anything from the Constitution until the 13th Amendment. And then I point to the bottom of the Constitution. Then I say, hey, you see all these people that wrote the Constitution? They were all white and they own people that look like me. We've talked about this. Now, the racism has taken on a more covert mechanism. It's become more covert. Granted, and this is another reason why I said the Biden administration is going to be worse than the Trump administration. The Trump administration, and of course Donald Trump, was a flat out obvious racist. With Donald Trump, with Joe Biden, you're going to have a bunch of black and brown and people and women that are going to uphold all of the tenets and pillars of white supremacy. And then it's going to be incredibly more difficult to criticize these people because, wait a minute, if you criticize a woman vice president that locked up a whole bunch of black and brown people when she was a state attorney and a district attorney and a senator, no, she didn't lock them up as a senator, it becomes a bit more difficult to be critical of these people. Power is felt. It's never seen.
Absolutely.
I'm going to make sure I say that again. Power is felt. It is never seen. You can't see an earthquake, but you can feel the tremors under your feet. Yeah. You can't necessarily see a tornado unless you see it, the dust kind of swirling around. But you feel the wind and you see the debris flying in your direction. That sort of power dynamic with racism is an ingredient of white supremacy, and it also leads to white power. Because at this point, when you have President Joe Biden stating yesterday at a press conference, I haven't called the family of Daunte Wright. But we want people to peacefully protest. But there is no justification for people looting and damaging property and people in the streets. Where was that when he wrote a crime bill that disproportionately locked up loads of black and brown people in 1994? Where was that level of compassion, Joe Biden? Where was that? Where was that when he wrote the Rave Act in 1993? Where was that? Where was that level of compassion when he decided to dramatically over-surveil everybody with the Counterterrorism Act of 1995? Where was that, Joe? Where was that? I am beyond tired of white people telling black people how they should act and behave and how to comport themselves when white people consistently kill black people in the streets.
Yeah.
And the last person that nobody should tone police anybody, but the last person I want to be tone policed by is by a racist white guy who occupies the highest seat of power in the United States.
Yes, thank you. I mean, there's a lot to be said.
Where was this level of compassion when Joe Biden wrote the crack law of 1988?
Yeah.
Where was this? But no, you know what? Let's peacefully protest. Just peacefully protest. Peacefully protest. Peacefully protest. The reason we have over-militarized police is because of Joe Biden. It's because of Joe Biden. Because he put a ton of money into over-policing and military-grade weaponry into the police forces, locally and state and federally. So this is exactly why when Daunte Wright gets killed by a cop, hundreds of police officers in a tiny community outside of Minneapolis can descend upon protesters. But when an angry group of Trump supporters storms the Capitol building, those same police ends up sitting on their hands. And just in case anybody wants to know, I'm trying to remember the exact number. I think it's either 23 or 29 different police departments, not precincts, but different police organizations in Washington, D.C. 29 of them. That includes colleges and universities. Okay, so, American University will have their police force, and Howard has their police force, and Gallaudet University will have their police force. There are 29 different police forces in Washington, D.C. And when a bunch of mostly white folks decided to storm the Capitol building, everybody sat on their hands. When a bunch of angry white people decided to have an assassination plot against Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer and Virginia Governor Ralph Northam, white people sat on their hands. But the minute black people decided to protect a black state legislator in Michigan, the police decided to show up. Everybody showed up. Everybody showed up and showed out. It's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
the videos of the protests look like a war zone in a different country.
I am close personal friends with people who have been involved or lived in situations where there has been a war.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I care about many of those people. In fact, all of those people deeply who have been involved in these situations. And the one phrase that I have heard consistently from all of my friends who have been involved who have lived in a place where they have been involved in war is, Joe, you don't want to be in a place where war happens. That is the one consistent message I have heard from many of my deep, close and personal friends who have lived in situations where there has been some sort of conflict. This common phrase, given a couple different words here and there, has been, Joe, you don't want to live in a situation where there has been war. I have friends of mine who have been displaced as a result of internalized conflict in particular countries.
Mm-hmm.
Now more than ever, I'm beginning to feel that Black and brown people in these United States are not that far removed from prisoners of war against a hostile government, which is the United States of America.
Yeah.
Because if the president of the United States yesterday can go ahead and say, I don't know what happened, we need to see if this was an accidental shooting or not. We want peaceful protesting, but there's no justification for anybody to damage property. There's no justification for damage anybody's property. Where was that rhetoric when a bunch of white folks damaged the Capitol building of the United States? Where was that, Joe Biden? Where was that? Where was that? Where was that? Where was that? The last person, if I'm Daunte Wright's mother, and I see a phone call with a phone number with the area code 202, because 202 is the area code for Washington, D.C., and somebody gets on the line and says, Miss Wright, hi, this is so-and-so, presidential aide for the President of the United States. President Joe Biden would like to speak to you. I would hang up the phone. I would hang up the phone. The reason why I would hang up the phone is because Daunte Wright's death is a result of, quite honestly, right-wing policing policies that Joe Biden, as a Democratic senator, endorsed.
Mm.
Moreover and furthermore, with his increased military budget, which is more than what Trump is put on the table. And Joe Biden has said he is against defunding the police. So was his predecessor. So was not his predecessor, but the man he used to work for, Barack Hussein Obama.
Yeah.
And Daunte Wright's blood is on Obama's hands also.
Yeah.
Because Barack Obama, as a Black president, if you remember this, Barack Obama as a Black president couldn't publicly defend I think a Princeton professor and Dr. Henry Louis Gates, otherwise known as Skip Gates, against a white police officer that unlawfully arrested Gates in front of his own home. So instead of Obama excoriating police departments across the United States, what did he do? Let's have a beer summit. And care to guess who was at the beer summit? The racist white cop, Barack Obama, Dr. Gates, and of course, none other than Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, white police officers knew they had a Black face for white supremacy in the White House.
Yeah.
And it was open, and at that point, it was open season on Black people. Yeah. Continuing on with all of this, we talked about how Daunte Wright was murdered by police on the 11th of April. On the 11th of April. On April 12th, 2015, Freddie Gray was picked up by the cops.
Mm-hmm.
Freddie Gray was picked up by the cops. And he was thrown into the back of a police wagon, and he died from his injuries a week later. And I vividly remember my hometown of Baltimore going. People think these these Black Lives Matter protests that we saw last summer were violent and crazy. People think that what happened at the Capitol building on January 6th was what was beyond the pale. You didn't see what happened in Baltimore. Actually, everybody saw what happened in Baltimore then. Everybody saw. Everybody saw that CVS on the corner of Pennsylvania Avenue and North Avenue get looted. Everyone saw it. I used to live in downtown Baltimore in not Charles Village, in Mount Vernon, on the corner of Reed and Cathedral Streets. A block away, up the street, were a couple of convenience stores and other shops. All those shops got broken into. All of them. All of them. I remember walking around my neighborhood, down by the Walters Art Gallery, up the 7-Eleven, a bunch of different restaurants. All those stores got broken into. When I was doing my internship on the east side of Baltimore at the International Rescue Committee, I drove the same route, and that senior center that was in construction, that was on the east side of Baltimore, I drove past that. News crews all over the place trying to find out what happened. But none of those same news crews were there before Freddie Gray. None of those same news crews were there to figure out, why does Baltimore have a police problem? Why does Baltimore consistently kill black people more than white people? Why is the entire west side of Baltimore a food desert and a banking desert? News doesn't want to report on these things.
No.
Why is wealth inequality out of control in Baltimore? Why is murders and carjacking a huge problem in Baltimore? Why is lead paint and lead in the water an issue in Baltimore? But it only happens when the news wants to tell a story.
Yeah.
That people have been in that city crying out for help for generations and generations and generations. We did an entire episode about racist housing policies. And in that episode, we talked about a book by Dr. Richard Rothman called The Color of Law. Mm-hmm. Color of Law. And in that book, we talked about how redlining began in Baltimore in 1910. How redlining began in 1910 in Baltimore City.
Go ahead.
I
was going to say, we've talked about a lot of these issues before, and I think that there is a common thread throughout many of the episodes of Joe and Cat Chats over the last year, almost year, that talk about these issues and how sort of they come into play and what is happening around them. There's a couple of other points that you brought up, Joe, that I just want to speak to. One, I guess the first one is that when you said, racism is not as visible as it was maybe in the 50s and 60s, I would agree to an extent. I think that the proof is all over the internet. You just need to walk down the street and open your eyes. There is proof of racism everywhere you look. So I disagree in that sense. But I also agree in the sense that coming from Canada, we have this tendency here to sort of have what's called smiling racism or maple washing, where we are, friendly and courteous and seemingly nice to people of color, to people that are indigenous, to, Black people. But it's sort of a passive aggressive thing that has racism at its core. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a problem because often, racism is not sort of seen in plain sight here. It's a look or something that's not necessarily blatant, like it would have been like in the 50s. Correct. The other thing that you brought up was sort of these protests and the differences between what happens when BIPOC people protest for justice and when white people protest for whatever they're protesting for.
Overturning the results of an election.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's that. And I just wanted to highlight in that conversation, there was 2 protests that happened in Canada over the weekend.
Okay.
One of them was in Malton, Ontario, and that's the place where Ijaz Chaudhry was murdered in his living room. He was having a mental health crisis, and his family left the home, they called the non-emergency line to get help. And as the police entered his home from the balcony, he was shot and murdered. There was a protest this past weekend demanding the names of the police officers because we already know they're not going to be held accountable, and we want them to be held accountable. The police presence at these protests this past weekend was noteworthy in the sense that they were agitating. There was a wall, there's videos of a wall of police officers trying to, barricade basically with their bodies the protesters. When they were peaceful, they agitated, they ended up arresting several protesters for literally no reason. I mean, a protest gets loud, people are angry, but they were not doing anything to threaten these police officers, yet they still got beat up. And many of them got arrested. And to juxtapose that, I guess, to use a big word, to contrast that, I guess, there was a protest in Edmonton area this past weekend that was an anti-lockdown protest. Basically, there was a mega church that was, defying the lockdown and remaining open for worship, but they got fined. The priest or pastor went to jail for 35 days, and there was a group of primarily white protesters and worshipers. Actually, there was people from both sides in protest there, and what happened was there was like 1 or 2 cop cars and a whole bunch of people. What ended up happening is they removed the gates, the barricades, and they trespassed on the land of the Enoch Cree Nation, I believe it was. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And they vandalized the chief's vehicle. I saw video of the chief saying, like, he showed the damage to his vehicle and just said, like, these people are trespassing on our land. They cannot be doing this here. And it was just a blatant disregard for the respect and the property of the nation, the Indigenous nation. And like, there was like 2 cop cars. There's literally like 4 officers. And so like, the contrast, the comparison of these 2 protests that happen over the weekend is just so obvious, that how systemic and how fucking obvious this racism is, and how the police are so ingrained that they don't even think to send officers to a rally that's literally like damaging property, but it's white people doing it, versus peaceful protesters that are just demanding justice for someone who got murdered last year.
Cap, I want to make sure I'm crystal clear with what I'm going to say next. You said there were 4 police officers that showed up for a congregation of people from a church. Okay, and you said it was a mega church. So, and I've been to a mega church or 2 in my lifetime. Those mega churches can get 1,500, couple thousand people. You have a staff of maybe 30 to 50 people showing up. My younger brother lives in Spokane, Washington. He and his wife and his 3 kids attend one of these quote unquote mega churches, where they have a little kiddie area for Sunday school for the kids, and the adults sit in these big areas, and it's quite large. That church that he is a member of, they get about 12 to 1,500 people on a Sunday. You said there were 4 cops for, let's just say 1,000 people. Okay.
I mean, maybe less. I would say more like 100, maybe 200. Like, It wasn't that big of a protest, but it was damaging.
We'll say 200. We'll say 4 cops for 200 people. 4 cops for 200 people. You do realize 4 police officers were involved in the murder of George Floyd. 4 for 1 human being, and 1 human being that they said they felt that there was a crowd of people there, not even a crowd, a small group gathering of people that said they felt threatened. They felt threatened. 4 people that eventually killed one man. Contrast that with Canada and a bunch of white folks, where it's 4 people, 4 cops for about a couple of hundred people. And they are damaging property. Damaging property. George Floyd allegedly tried to pass a counterfeit $20 bill, and it ended up costing him his life. And again, when we talk about property, because again, a president of the United States is so hell-bent on protecting property and making sure that we value property over people. Because again, that's what he said yesterday. He said, we don't have a right to loot. We don't have a right to be violent. Another bill that Joe Biden wrote, not co-sponsored or had a hand in, he presented the bill, is the Comprehensive Forfeiture Act of 1984. And many of you are like, well, Joe, what exactly is the Comprehensive Forfeiture Act of 1984? It involves civil asset forfeiture. So if you are suspected of committing a crime, but don't actually commit the crime, your assets can be taken from you. Your property can be taken from you. In last week's episode of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, one of the human rights violations that we discussed is you have the right to your own belongings, unless it's for a good reason that it should be taken away from you. There's no good reason that merely on the suggestion of being involved in criminal activity, but not actually being charged with a crime, that your assets should be taken away from you. So again, property over people, belongings over human lives. This is what we're seeing in the United States. This is what we're seeing around the world. We saw video footage of Army Lieutenant Caron Nazario this past weekend being pulled over by Virginia police officers. He did nothing wrong. It was a traffic stop, and he was sprayed with mace. It was pepper sprayed. And I saw it. There's a 2.5-minute video. It's among some of the most heartbreaking footage I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
And he was driving a really nice sport utility vehicle. And he said repeatedly, "This is fucked up, man. This is fucked up." And what he said when he said, "This is fucked up, man, this is fucked up," his eyes were saying so much more than just those few words that were coming out of his lips that I just repeated.
Yeah.
When he said, "I'm a troop, is this how you treat military personnel? Is this how you treat military personnel?" And the same people, the same exact folks that said that Colin Kaepernick was disrespectful and disrespecting the troops because he took a knee to protest police brutality and white supremacy and racism, are the same people that are now supporting these 2 Virginia police officers for pepper spraying an Army soldier, a troop. So which is it? Which is it? Which is it? Which corner of your mouth are you going to speak out of this time? Which side? Is it, hey, support the troops? Or you know what? He's black. He doesn't get the same rights as a black troop as our white troops do.
That's exactly what underlies this.
He doesn't get the same.
It's because he's black. He doesn't get the same privileges as a white troop. And I think this is
And real quick, just as an aside, and I want to make sure I bring this in. And where's the Secretary of Defense on this? Where is he? I think his name is Lloyd Wright, if I'm not mistaken. Lloyd Wright, I think that's his name. I could be wrong. I mean, there's so many different people I'm trying to remember. But he's the first black Secretary of Defense. He's kind of in charge of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard. Why hasn't he spoken out about this? Why didn't he say, wait a minute, these fine men and women who defend our country do not deserve to be treated like this. Moreover, nobody deserves to be treated like this by the police. Nobody does. Nobody does.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you make a really good point, and I think that this circumstance, this event that happened, is a really good demonstration of what you were talking about maybe 15 or 20 minutes ago, in that, the power dynamics here was it was when you watch the video, if you feel comfortable and are able to watch the video, pay attention to the power dynamics, because this person's a lieutenant in
The army,
the armed forces.
mm-hmm.
This person is respectable in the sense that, I mean,
in uniform.
He's in uniform. I don't appreciate war. I don't want the war machine to be continuing, but this person is a respectable human being. They're doing their job. He's in uniform. He's traveling in his new car, whatever. He took the time. He took the time, and he was calm the whole time. He took the time to drive slowly and pull over in a well-lit area because he knew he was Black and driving.
In a gas station. And
in a gas station so that he would be in a well-lit area.
Correct. There's two things gas stations have a lot of: lights and cameras.
Yes, exactly. And that was the smartest decision he could have made. But he got fucking maced in the eyes while he was sitting in his vehicle. He had done nothing wrong. He took every precaution he could have. He was in his fucking uniform. And there's still this power dynamic involved with this asshole cop. And he said in the video, "I am afraid to get out of my car." And the cop said, "You should be."
Then Nazario, the Nazario went ahead and said, I can't unbuckle my seatbelt. I can't see. I can't breathe. I'm having trouble breathing. Where have we heard the phrase, "I can't breathe" before? Where have we heard that? George Floyd, "I can't breathe." Cedric Chauvet in France, "I can't breathe." Javier Ordonez, "I can't breathe." We've heard this phrase before. Alton Sterling, Eric Garner, "I can't breathe." We've heard this phrase before. Now we're hearing it from a member of the United States military. And again, where is Lloyd Austin? Not Lloyd, I forget what I said earlier. Lloyd Austin is the Secretary of Defense, and he's the Black Secretary of Defense. Where is he saying, why hasn't he said anything about this? He's too busy spending money bombing Black and brown people in the Middle East. That's why.
Exactly.
Instead of speaking up against the police machine and the police regime that he is ultimately a part of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because BIPOC lives in the system that we're currently running under have no value. There is no value to human being, and there's no value to life.
It's, there's another lady, Victoria Esperanza Ariaza. If you remember her, she was the lady from El Salvador who was murdered in Mexico. And she was killed by the cops with a chokehold. The cops knelt on her neck. And the last words she said were the Spanish versions of "I can't breathe." She said that also. Now we're having cops macing people, macing members of the military. And I have got loads of thoughts on the military. I think the military is as bad as the police. But
I agree. But for the purposes of this event, I think it's more important to be looking at the power dynamics and what was involved with this incident, and our personal feelings on the military and the war machine. Are obvious, but I think they need to be put aside for this particular, because it's more important to point out what you said a few minutes ago, which is, where the fuck are these people that think all lives matter?
Where are they?
When they are criticizing Kaepernick for taking a knee because it's apparently, disrespectful to the troops. Yeah. And
the crazy part is Colin Kaepernick consulted a former troop named Eric Boyer.
Exactly.
And Eric Boyer said, "You know what? The best way to not be disrespectful to the troops is to take a knee."
Exactly.
Again, so which corner of your mouth would you like to speak out of this time around? Do you want to speak out of the corner that says, "Hey, you're being disrespectful because you took a knee," or, "Wait a minute, you shouldn't be speaking about racism and protesting police brutality. You should just be a football player. Shut up and throw the ball"? Which is it? Which is it? Which is it? Which is it?
Yeah.
You know, the Derek Chauvin trial is still happening,
Mm-hmm.
Minneapolis, Minnesota. And we talked about that extensively a couple of weeks ago in the white fragility episode. But again, I have a lot of people who I care deeply about in the Minneapolis area, and I don't want to see anything happen to them. But if this cop that shot Daunte Wright walks, and if Derek Chauvin walks, Minneapolis was going to burn to a crisp.
Yeah.
And it's going to make what happened in Baltimore 5-6 years ago look like a Walt Disney parade in Epcot Center. It's going to look like a Thanksgiving Day, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade in New York City, or the Roseville parade in downtown Los Angeles on New Year's Day. It's going to be nothing compared to what's going to happen.
I agree.
Nothing's going to happen.
I mean, yeah, all eyes are on Minneapolis and area right now. And I think it's telling in response to the Daunte Wright shooting, the mayor came out and said this couldn't have happened at a worse time. And while that quote is taken out of context, I do think that it's important to point out in this example that, like, where that's coming from.
If you were saying a good time for that to happen,
exactly, it demonstrates that he cares more about the optics of what is going on right now with the trial than the actual life that was lost. And I think that that's something that needs to be talked about more.
And let's not forget the lady who shot Daunte Wright. I want to make sure that everybody understands some information about the lady who shot Daunte Wright. The lady who shot Daunte Wright has been on the police force for 26 years. 26 years. And again, I have this information here, and of course I can't find it, but now I've got it because I'm a prepared brother. 26 years on the police force. She was also the president of the Brooklyn Center Police Officers Association, which is essentially the police union for the police in that area. And in that role, her responsibility was to represent other officers involved in deadly police shootings.
Yeah.
That's what she did. So when she yelled, "Taser, taser," boom.
There's no way that she didn't know what the fuck.
How the hell
she didn't have a gun in her hand. She did not. There's no way.
How did she not know that? How did she not know that? How did she not know that? We're coming up on about 2 minutes left.
Yeah.
We could easily go another hour. There's a part of me that would like to, but we got to keep this to a 60-minute chat.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much more that we could have talked about and we wanted to talk about. One thing I just wanted to mention is I just wanted to correct myself. Last week in the part 2 episode of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we were talking about having the human right to practice religion, and I mentioned some groups facing religious persecution. I mentioned the Rohingya from Burma and also mentioned those in China, and I just wanted to clarify that when I said that, I was sort of brushed over that, and I just wanted to clarify that China, those in China facing persecution and genocide are the Uyghurs, and those in Burma/Myanmar are the Rohingya. Correct. So those are the groups that are not only having their human rights violated, but they are facing genocide and violence, and it has rendered many stateless. So thank you for allowing me to correct that from last week. And
to go along with that, in the next minute that we have, today is also the first day of Ramadan, and many of those Rohingya Muslims and those Uyghurs are unable to practice Ramadan because of religious persecution that they suffer in the areas in which they live. So we want to make sure, again, and we're going to do a future episode about Islamophobia later this year sometime. We want to make sure that everybody who are practicing Muslims have the opportunity to practice Ramadan, because it is an important religious practice for Muslims, and including those who have been persecuted, including the millions of people in the northern section of India. There's a couple of 100 million Indians who are Muslims who are being persecuted, who are unable to practice Ramadan starting today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for saying that as well. And I mean, we're out of time, so thank you so much for everything, Joe. It's always a pleasure. Thank you, everyone who tuned in. Thank you for listening. Please like and share and subscribe. Take care of yourselves and each other.
Peace.